Alright, welcome back to SouFLoTV again, everybody. It is your host with the most. No long talking. Watch this. So, you want to tell me, right, that Vybz Kartel is still incarcerated. Vybz Kartel got 35 years before he is eligible for parole. We're talking about a case where nobody was found and no significant DNA evidence linked this man to this case, to this murder that he was accused of. And when we say things like, look, they went overboard, above and beyond, and this we really don't think is about somebody that got killed. Lizard in this case. I think Kartel case is definitely more than something. Well, here's another case where I will prove to you that the justice system is rigged a certain way. Now, the Clarendon man, who was in 2015 sentenced to life at hard labor for incest with his teen daughter, who ironically was also the child of his stepdaughter whom he had impregnated years ago. Let that sink in. Let that sink in. For those of you who just went confused, let me clarify that for you. He was sentenced to life at hard labor for incest with his teen daughter. Now, his teen daughter, who ironically was the child of his stepdaughter. So this man was with a woman at once, and he molested that woman's daughter, which would have been his stepdaughter. He didn't molest her. He raped her. She had the baby. And then this baby grew a little bit, and then this man went and molested the baby as well. You got it now? Alright. Somebody like this deserves everything that you could think of that is bad to them. But yet still, even though he was sentenced to life in prison, on Friday he had his sentence of life reduced by the Court of Appeal to 15 years of imprisonment.
See a bitch pussy, my cocky sliding. She love the back as me love when she ride it. Fly the garage and I tell me fi drive it. Bring the tight pussy fi me. Yeah. You know the body. All out tight, see me, back foot. Yeah man, on you.
Wow. How does this work? How does this work? Now, according to the details unveiled before the court, the child had been left with her grandmother, the man's mother, because her mother had gone overseas. So it's one of these kind of cases. People run away, get a little visa, get a paper, something, run off and leave their children in the care of, say, grandma. Leave the children in the care of predators. Leave the children unprotected. You know, like barrel children. He, however, took the little girl to live with him, even though the mother left the little girl with his mother, which is her grandmother. He took the little girl to live with him, so as to have access to her. Bumbleclot, man. The child in her testimony told the court that her father at first rubbed himself on her, but it did not go further. I don't know what rub himself on her mean. In a later incident, he, however, called her to his sleeping area, told her to take off her clothes, lay down in the bed, and had intercourse with her, after which he threatened to kill her if she told anyone. This is the little girl's testimony. She reported the matter to a guidance counselor at her school, which led them to his arrest and led to him being charged for indecent assault and incest. People, this is just blatant rape, you know. Them talk about indecent assault and incest. Where was the rape charge? Shockingly, during the trial for the offenses against this child, her mother testified that he had been her own stepfather and had sexually and physically abused her herself when she herself was just a child. This method of operation with her was the same as that with her daughter. The court was told that sexual abuse resulted in a pregnancy and the birth of the same daughter now that he was convicted of molesting. Me bomba clot. Yo, them something ya? Now, the woman's story was confirmed by DNA testing, which was, that means them take out him sperm out her vagina, which was, or off her clothing, which was carried out as part of the investigation into the teenager's complaint. Both mother and child testified that he would beat them when they were under his control. So he beat them, draw them in a bed, rape them, impregnate the mother have a picnic, and him molest off that picnic too. Despite the fact that the events with the mother had taken place before, he was convicted of 2 counts of carnal abuse in respect to those events and was sentenced to 4 years imprisonment. Yes, you're hearing right. 4 years. He was serving those sentences when he was being tried for the offense against the daughter. So, what you see them something here? Now, following that trial, the father, who had changed his initial not guilty plea to guilty, was sentenced to imprisonment for life at hard labor. This is after they found the DNA evidence came back linking him specifically to that DNA. See? And then he changed his plea from not guilty to guilty. And he got life. And ordered to serve 15 years before he became eligible for parole. He was also sentenced to 5 years imprisonment at hard labor for the indecent assault charges. The convicted father, who then appealed the sentence, lost his bid in respect of the sentence for indecent assault, but he was allowed an appeal in respect of the offense of incest. How in the hell? Lawyers argued that the judge had made an error in failing to identify the normal range of sentences for incest and an appropriate starting point within that range for the convicted father. They further argued that the judge had placed too much focus on the aggravating factors in the case and failed to pay enough regards to factors such as his guilty plea, which resulted in him not receiving a fair sentence. How that makes sense to Uno, please. If that made sense to you just now, leave your comments in the comment section because I can't figure it out. They also contended that the judge made another error in imposing a sentence that was manifestly excessive. Which brings me to the Vybz Kartel case. Manifestly excessive for a case where you have one circumstantial evidence and no concrete evidence linking Vybz Kartel to that murder or a murder of that person he is accused of murdering, period. 35 years before eligible for parole. This man got told he would have to serve 15 before eligible for parole. After dating a woman, shack up with the woman, live with the woman, then raping that woman's daughter, which is his stepdaughter, impregnating her, and then going back and raping the child that came from that child. Yo, if I say me bumbleclot one more time. Listen, now, in the judgment handed down on Friday, the appeal court, in pointing out that Section 7(4) of the Sexual Offense Act stipulates that the maximum sentence for incest is imprisonment for life, said the judge did not specifically indicate any reason for starting at the maximum sentence and had therefore erred or made mistakes in this regard. Boy. The court, in noticing that the sentencing guidelines stipulate that the usual starting point is 7 years imprisonment, said this: however, would not be an appropriate starting point for him, since he knew that the child was born out of his sexual abuse of his stepdaughter, and the fact that he meted out the same type of physical abuse to her as he did to her mother is a basis for a higher starting point. I would agree to that. It, however, said that although his behavior is considered egregious and abhorrent, it is possible to imagine worse scenarios. You hear this rotted though? Why would we even want to try to imagine worse scenarios? It is what it is. This is what we have on the table. This is what we're looking at, and this is what he's been tried for. Imagine that. Imagine that an attorney stand up in court and say, well, you know, we could actually imagine worse scenarios, Your Honor. Really? This case is therefore not the worst of the worst. That is what they said. This case is therefore not the worst of the worst and does not deserve a starting point of life imprisonment. Again, I will say, apply that to the Vybz Kartel case now. That case is not the worst of the worst. We've seen people massacred their spouse and get way less time than Vybz Kartel. A man chop up him wife, you know. His wife of many years, who loved him and respected him all those years, have picnic with him and everything. And he chopped her up and got less time than Vybz Kartel did. They started out at a lesser starting point than life, and they never got anywhere close to giving them life. With Vybz Kartel, they gave him life, a hard life sentence. 35 years before you are even eligible for parole. Eligible for parole doesn't even mean that you get out of prison, you know, people. Understand that. So that's a short life sentence. It means that is when you can start to go before a parole board and ask if you can be granted parole. Parole is when you are let out on supervision. So in some sense, you're still doing time, because if you make one mistake, you will go back to finish out the rest of the time that was on that sentence. 35 to life for a case where a body was never found. And a man like this, an animal like this isn't a man. An animal, a beast like this, who was with a woman. This is his woman that he's supposed to be with. Common law wife. Rape off the woman, little girl, pregnant her, impregnated her, and then molest off the child that he molested and raped off and got a baby from, molested that baby as well, and ended up with 15 years. Me granny. This is crazy. An appropriate starting point would be 12 years. This is what they're arguing in court. This is what the appeal court said. An appropriate starting point would be 12 years. In agreeing that the learned judge did impose a sentence that was manifestly excessive, and ruled that the sentence imposed by the learned judge for the offense of incest be set aside, and a sentence of 15-year imprisonment at hard labor is substituted. The sentence is to be reckoned as having commenced on 22 of June 2015. And is to run concurrently with other sentences that were imposed on or before the 22nd of June 2015. The court, however, noted that the act at the time was relatively new, and that the learned judge was figuratively breaking new ground with the sentence that she was asked to impose. She did it. However, it was a mistake in using the maximum sentence as a starting point of exercise. Consequently, the court was entitled to reconsider the sentence. Now, people, let me ask you this. For a man that did what I just described, a man that lays with a woman, has a full relationship with a woman, deceives this woman and gets to this woman's little daughter, has forced sexual relations with this woman's daughter, who is supposed to be his wife then, and you draw away our little daughter, raped her little daughter, impregnated her little daughter, and she had the baby. And then you start molest that little baby as well. How in the hell is there ever to be any kind of low starting point when considering sentencing for someone like that? I think the judge who gave him life was right. That is exactly where it should have started. And that is exactly what it should have been. You know, I really want to ask these people in these positions of power that wield so much power around people's life. I want to ask them, were y'all drunk and high as hell when y'all came up with this decision to overturn this life sentence and give this man 15 years only? Considering what he had done, how could you in your right mind call yourself a learned anything and argue that he was sentenced excessively? No justice was served. No justice was served for the little girl who became a rape victim. No justice was served for the girl the mother of the little girl who he also raped to get that little girl. No justice was served there. But Vybz Kartel still in a prison, don't it? Right? Y'all see what I'm talking about now, right? Leave your comments in the comment section below. Tell me if you don't think something is definitely wrong with the system. I'm out. Peace.